Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hands Down DFS Week 2 DraftKings main slate breakdown. My name is Ryan, and I'm here, of course, with Scotty. Scotty, how's it going?
Going great, guys. Really excited about this week. Excited about getting back into some DraftKings action after two really good showdown slates with the Ravens and the Raiders, and then you also had Washington football team and the Giants. So on Monday and Thursday, two great games. Get me excited about some football on Sunday.
I mean, the primetime games have been decent. The Tampa Bay-Dallas game, this Thursday game, we've got some good football. So
we don't talk about the Bears and the Rams. That was a terrible game.
I left that game out on purpose.
But other than that, it's been great. The off-Sunday primetime game.
Exactly.
It's been great.
Well, I agree. Excited to get into week 2, and we're excited to be here breaking it down. So let's just get right into it and start talking about some of these QBs. First question, who do you think is the chalk on this slate? I feel like there's a lot of, we don't have Patrick Mahomes, we don't have Lamar Jackson, and kind of some of the higher price guys. So who is the chalk here?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the top, you see Kyler Murray. You see what he did last week against the Titans. He's going to be chalk. Played fantastic, and there's no reason for him to not have another great game against this Minnesota team that has your favorite cornerback in the league, Patrick Peterson.
Who is now on Minnesota.
If you saw any of our earlier videos, you would understand that inside joke. But yes, Kyler Murray definitely going to be chalk there. You don't need to spend a lot of time on that. Tom Brady, I think, is going to be another shootout. I was talking about how that's something I want to stay away from, actually. In that game, it's going to be wet. It's going to be rainy. Probably stay away from that. I would imagine, again, Justin Herbert. He's going to be another guy. We'll pull him up. He had an okay game, but going against the Dallas team that has a tough defense, I would imagine him also to be chalk. And looking at ownerships, they're projected to be pretty high as well. And then obviously you have Josh Allen as well. This one surprises me a little bit as chalk because I think that Dolphins defense is good. You want to talk about the Dolphins defense at all?
I mean, I was going to bring it up later. I think they're probably a top 6 defense. In my opinion, I am a Dolphins fan, but I think they're a really good defense. And I think the only reason why I think he's projected as high ownership as he is because at 7,200 and he brings the rushing upside, almost the same upside that Kyler Murray does on the ground. So for that $100 discount, it's just a good price for him. It's not a great matchup, but I think it's just a good price. I mean, that's the only reason.
Historically, how has your Dolphins fared against Josh Allen? Do you know?
I mean, I don't know stats off the top of my head, but I know the Bills have beat us. Have beat us pretty good.
Yeah, Bills averaged 31 points against the Dolphins during the Flores era. So,
well, there you go.
While Josh Allen is under it, so maybe there's some validation in the chalk being there for Josh Allen. But again, it's hard to bet against this Dolphins defense. I think we're going to get a lot into the quarterback play. How a lot of quarterbacks played really good last week. There's a really high number that hit over 20 points. And so if you could find that guy, that Jameis Winston last week, who can get you that same amount, maybe he's not going to have the crazy game like Kyler Murray and get you those extra 5 or 6 points. But if you're saving 3,000, 2,000, maybe that's worth it. So we'll definitely get into that a little bit. But those are the 4 guys I see as chalk this week.
Yeah, and to that point, that those 20+ point game from the quarterbacks, they weren't even really coming from the top of the QB slate. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, obviously, we don't need to talk about it too much, but he didn't do much. Josh Allen didn't do much. It was like Jameis Winston, Matt Stafford, all these kind of mid to low range guys who were putting up points. There's Kirk Cousins at 25. So I mean, I think you shows that you don't really have to pay up, and if you differentiate yourself in quarterback, it kind of goes a long way. Except for a GPP lineup.
So speaking of that, now that we're going to talk about that, who is your dark horse? Who is 1, going to be low owned, and 2, coming in at that discounted price that we were talking about?
So this is kind of scary because I don't know what to expect, but I kind of like Matt Ryan at 5,600, and yeah, he was probably one of the worst plays you could have played last week, but
7 points.
Yeah, that's not getting you any money in DraftKings at 7 points. But we saw what Dak did. First game back after big injury. He was putting up big numbers, kind of picking apart that Bucs secondary that they were a little banged up. Sean Murphy-Bunting went out with an injury early in the game, so and obviously the Bucs have been known to just stuff the run game. Elliott did nothing, and so it was really they went all to in the Cowboys went to the air that whole game, and I think the Falcons are going to do the same thing. So I mean, I kind of like
you're telling me Mike Davis isn't the play this week. Are you trying to tell me that?
I would advise against it, is what I would say. How about you? Who's your like dark horse player?
I hate it because, well, first off, I know that just because I said something about it, Mike Davis is going to have like 4 touchdowns this week. He's going to have like an Alvin Kamara type game.
Yeah, definitely.
But the guy I like going off of, and again, this is a little bit clickbaity, where you see Cleveland here. I'm going to be looking at Tyrod Taylor. You see Cleveland here has the 32nd worst passing defense this year. Okay, well, who did they play week 1? The Chiefs. Okay, so maybe this is a little bit of something where it's not really as bad as you think it is. I think that the Browns are going to be fine on defense. I don't think anything like that. I don't think even that the Houston Texans have a chance at all in staying close in that game. But that's why I like Tyrod Taylor coming in a little bit less expensive than your guy, Matt Ryan, pulling up Fantasy Pros just to see what his ownership is looking at. And it looks like they have him projected at less than 1% owned. So, again, a dark horse play. Somebody who last week had almost 24 fantasy points going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Obviously, is different than the Browns. But I think there's a couple narratives here. You got the Tyrod Taylor revenge game going on. Something that we heard a lot about this week, I'm sure if you've listened to any kind of fantasy podcast, any kind of NFL podcast, is that the Texans have a lot of professionals on their team. It's not like this, like a bunch of rookies that are just coming in and kind of throwing the ball around. These are guys who have been proven. You have Mark Ingram, you have Brandon Cooks, you have Tyrod Taylor. These are guys who know what football is and they know what they're doing. And so definitely a play that I like to have some potential here. Again, not expecting him to necessarily be super great, but again, just a play that we can kind of pivot off of at low ownership and at cheaper price.
Yeah, and at 5,500, he put up 23.6 last game. Obviously, he was playing the Jags, so that'll probably be an easier defense than Cleveland's going to be. But like 24 points is just fine at 5,500. That gives you basically $1,500 to $2,000 to spend elsewhere. So I mean, if he's putting up 2 touchdowns a game, that would be definitely a safe. No, I mean, I'm not going to call Tyrod Taylor safe, but that would definitely be a play that you can use.
One last guy I know who you like, Matthew Stafford,
yep,
right? You
I was
like
going there
week?
next.
How are you feeling about him?
Love Matthew Stafford. I think we're going to get really good ownership on him. He's currently projected as the 18th highest owned quarterback. Obviously, this is still a couple days early, a couple days before the slate locks, so could move.
After the tens of people who listen to this, they'll pick
exactly.
up on the Matthew Stafford. You'll see the projections shoot through the roof.
Exactly. No, but Indy's traditionally has a good defense, but I think it's mostly known for stopping the run, and I don't know if Henderson's going to, basically move the needle. I think he's going to be stuffed at the line, and I think it's going to be up to Stafford and his weapons he has to basically lead this game. I mean, we saw Lockett had a great game last week against Indy. Metcalf didn't do the best, but I mean, just having both of those guys on the field was, they were able to free up Lockett by having both those guys on the field. I think that's kind of the same narrative this week when you have Kupp and Woods. They're basically just a mini Metcalf and Lockett. So I think Stafford, for the low ownership he's going to be, 6,000 is a great price for Kupp too, for his ceiling. So yeah, I think that's definitely, it provides a pretty average, if you're stacking Kupp and Stafford, that's you're not spending too much, you're not going extreme value. It's a very kind of medium play that you can make, and I think it gets you good leverage on the field.
You gotta love that 10 targets.
Yeah.
Bill Sim is also listening to his podcast today, and he was making the point that if you could do a redraft of your league after week 1, why isn't Cooper Kupp going as the number 2 wide receiver off the board? I don't know if it's that extreme, but
not quite.
He definitely is playing good. You got to love what you're seeing out of the Sean McVay offense now that Matthew Stafford is there.
So is Bill Simmons also saying Stafford, or is it like a top 3 quarterback, or how does that work?
I don't know. He didn't say necessarily anything about Stafford, but he does have the Patriots winning the Super Bowl this year.
Well,
so I don't
that's
know.
nothing new.
Yeah. So, and he calls himself a true homer as far as he'll tell you when they're bad. Well, they lost to the Dolphins week 1. Nothing against the Dolphins, but
I was gonna say,
you got to win.
Come on, man.
Got to win that game if you're winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree.
Okay, so moving over to the running back spots. I know we have a couple just like we did with the quarterbacks. Who are the chalk plays? Who are the pay ups that we're going to probably be seeing a lot of this week?
Basically, all the guys at the top. You know, McCaffrey's going to bring ownership every game with his upside because he can catch the ball. He could, receive 100 yards and rush for 100 yards, and that really wouldn't be surprising. So even at almost 10K, I think he's going to get ownership. I think Kamara and Henry, more so Kamara than Henry, but I think Kamara also gets a lot of looks. We mentioned Cleveland in the quarterback, where you mentioned Tyrod Taylor going against Cleveland, but I like it the other way around. Nick Chubb against Houston. Houston was one of the worst rushing teams, worst teams against the rush last year. So I think there's going to be a lot of ownership on Nick Chubb. Kareem Hunt probably will also get some. So I think those 3 guys are kind of going to carry the bulk of the ownership. And I would probably fade McCaffrey if he will be as high owned as he is. But the other 2 guys I think are still playable. All right. So, yeah, the chalk is going to be at the top of the running back slate. And I know there's a few guys kind of in the middle that had off weeks last week, maybe didn't perform up to expectations. Who do you like to have a nice bounce back game week 2?
Yeah, there's 2 guys specifically who I like to have as bounce back games, and I'm not alone in this. The 2 guys I'm going to be talking about, one's, according to Fantasy Pros, Najee Harris. He's going to be coming in between 20 to 30% owned. And then Ezekiel Elliott's the other guy at 10 and 20% owned. So it's not necessarily these big kind of dark horse plays or crazy GPP pivots, but definitely spots where you're going to take advantage of a game or 2 players who had really, really bad games. You had 5.9 points from Najee Harris, and then you also have 5.9 points. It's amazing that they had the same score from Ezekiel Elliott. Both going up against better defenses. If you look at the, not better defense, but better defenses for the fantasy-wise, if you look at what the Raiders gave up on the ground, I know you have the Lamar Jackson factor, but even if you take that out, they still gave up 93 rushing yards on the ground to running backs. And then if you also sprinkle in the extra 86 yards to Lamar Jackson, that's going to be much more suitable, much more nicer for Najee Harris to be running it. And then also Ezekiel Elliott, I just don't think the usage that Elliott had last game I don't think that's what we're going to see moving forward. He did run the most routes out of any running back. I think he only had a couple targets though. He only had 2 targets, but he did run the most routes for any running back in week 1. So 2 spots that I really do like as the bounce backs. Again, these aren't necessarily plays where you're going to be kind of cheating the rest of the group on ownership, but definitely 2 solid plays for middle of the line chalk that might be worth eating.
Yeah, and I know we talked about this a little offline, but it seems like this running back slate, all of my favorite plays are kind of in this mid-range to even more value plays. I mean, it's almost worth considering fading maybe the top 5 guys, and that gets you. That's where the ownership will be, like we talked about. That'll give you a lot of leverage on the field if you can fade those top 5 guys and maybe focus on these 6,000, 5,000 level players. So, I mean, I couldn't agree more with Elliott and Najee Harris. I think they're both due for good games. So I'm hopeful that they'll meet expectations this week.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as a Steelers fan, we're going to need it. Definitely going to need it. But
yeah. There's an interesting situation brewing in San Francisco with Raheem Mostert going out, and Trey Sermon was a healthy scratch last week, but now might be called into action this week behind Eli Mitchell. What do you take of San Francisco this week?
San Francisco is definitely weird. I think a lot of people are going to be looking at Mitchell, and they're going to be playing him as kind of the safe play, right? Because we saw him last week, obviously with Sermon out. He's just going to be the one that if you hopefully know what you're going to get out of it. Again, I don't think anybody really knows here, but I think Mitchell's going to be that guy. If you want to kind of go crazy and you want to throw some Sermon in there, I'm not opposed to it. I don't think that you're going to be able to just throw him in a lineup and expect that he's going to get you 15 points. He is coming at in between that 1 to 5% projected ownership. So he is going to be kind of getting you a little bit of a pivot there. That's going to be lesser than what Eli Mitchell's coming at, Elijah Mitchell, at that 5 to 10% ownage. Do you know? I didn't watch the game. Is it Eli or is it Elijah? Because looking at Fantasy Pros, they're showing Elijah. DraftKings, Eli. Do you have any idea?
Nope, I've read a bunch of articles, and I think I've seen it, about 50-50 on what they've been calling him. But Eli's easier to say, so.
I just feel like at a certain point, if you don't even know the dude's name, why are we putting him in our lineups? But
because it's a great play, a great leverage play.
Oh man,
if you can't name a guy, who's going to play him?
Right. Yeah. I mean, they're both coming at under 10%. Sermon's getting a little bit better as far as the ownership side, but whoever plays is going to be such a good play if they are the lead back. If they do some kind of running back by committee, because there is another guy, Hasty, who we didn't even talk about, and he's also kind of more of the proven vet in that, coming in at 1 to 5% owned as well. But man, if there's any kind of news, we're recording this Friday night. We still don't really know if there's any kind of news as far as, hey, this person's going to be getting the bulk of the carries. Just go with that guy. But again, if you want to try to do some kind of pivot and you trust Sermon, I think he's a great runner. They drafted him in the 3rd round for a reason. Right. But it's just that week 1 healthy scratch is very scary.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because I don't see a situation which Eli Mitchell gets or Sermon gets more carries than Mitchell. I think it's Mitchell's backfield, but I'm just curious to see what they do with Sermon. I mean, I don't know why it was a scratch week 1, but like you said, he was drafted early. He looked solid in preseason, so I'm assuming they're going to want to work him into the offense. So just curious to see what his workload will be.
Yeah, and I think it is worth noting too. I mean, Philadelphia does have a good front. They have Fletcher Cox, they have Brandon Graham, they have Javon Hargrave, all really solid players. They were able to make life terribly miserable for Matt Ryan last week. But I mean, again, so even at that, if you do have kind of a split, I think the Shanahan offense is still going to be able to move around a solid. I mean, you see here that they are currently ranked at 23rd, even though Mike Davis didn't necessarily have the greatest game last week. So you definitely have a good spot there, but I think Philadelphia's defensive line maybe played a little bit worse than they actually are, just because of how many passing downs there were. I think if a team were to try to run it more, I don't know necessarily how successful they would be against that front. So That's another factor in all of this right now too.
Right. So I want to talk about the range I kind of mentioned before, that low $6,000, high $5,000 range. There's several guys in this range which I absolutely love this week. I think most of my ownership is going to fall into that area, from right there at 6,200 with Zeke, who we talked about having a bounce back game, down to 5,400 in Damien Harris. There's three other guys I like. So Damien Harris, Melvin Gordon, Chris Carson, David Montgomery, and Ezekiel Elliott. 5 guys I really like this week. Just touching on them quickly. Carson, you know what you're getting out of him. He's a safe play. He's gets 15 touches every week, and he gets good work with those touches. He's averaging like 4.5 yards a carry last season. So he's solid. He's a good cash play. If he finds the end zone, he'll be great value. Melvin Gordon, going against the 3rd worst defense in the NFL versus running backs last year. He came out and just stomped 23.8 points, kind of not what I was expecting. I mean, I know I kind of written him off like 2 years ago, and he's come out and smashed it. Damien Harris had 23 carries against the Dolphins, put up 100 yards. So he had a costly fumble, but like what we mentioned earlier, I think the Dolphins have a great defense, probably a top 5 or 6 defense. So in a game where New England should be leading the whole game, I like Damien Harris to get a lot of work. And then lastly, David Montgomery, I think he's just way too cheap for the volume he gets. Last season, he had the 4th most rushing attempts in the league. Even if the Bears are playing from behind that game against Cincinnati, I think he's still going to be getting a ton of work. I mean, you can see he only had 1 reception, but he does play a role out of the backfield for whoever the quarterback is there now, Foles.
Andy Dalton.
Foles
is on the team, not starting.
Those are 5 guys I like in that range.
Gotcha. So I'm going to throw 2 counterpoints at you because I think David Montgomery is a great play. The fact that he got 21 points, almost 22 in a week against the Rams, where they were not even close to winning that game ever. And it's a good front with Aaron Donald, obviously. I think he's a solid play. I think Zeke is a solid play. We talked about his ownership. We also talked Carson also has some pretty strong ownership. The 2 guys that you listed there who have lower ownership, both of them in the 1 to 5% range, Melvin Gordon and Damien Harris. 2 reasons that I can think of as for why those 2 guys are getting lower ownership. Melvin Gordon, he was outsnapped by Javonte Williams. Does that worry you at all?
It does, because I did think Javonte Williams would kind of eventually take over the backfield for Denver and be the number 1 running back. So I think that's what they are trying to do, but Melvin Gordon was very efficient when he did have the ball. I didn't watch the game, so I mean, I'm not going to try to overanalyze it, but maybe Javonte Williams came in as a change of pace back. I don't know. Don't know how the game went, but I mean, so yes, it does worry me. As you can see, 14 attempts is a lot of attempts for a guy who only had 5 points. But Melvin Gordon just played really well, and I think he's going to be so reliable, especially when they're going to be running the ball likely 30 times this game. So I mean, both of them are probably good plays.
Yeah. And then the other point on Damien Harris, because he's also getting lower ownership. We all know with Belichick, the proverbial doghouse that exists with running backs who fumble the ball. How did the Dolphins win that game last week?
I couldn't tell you. It was I counted them out multiple times. I think a lot of people did, but their defense just held strong. They got a couple red zone takeaways, and it just somehow turned it around. But I mean, I'm not
takeaway at the end of the game, specifically being a Damien Harris fumble.
Yeah,
I'm worried about that a little bit with just not him being at full strength, or if Belichick is kind of holding him back. Obviously, Ramondre Stevenson, who would probably be the backup because J.J. Taylor was listed or was a healthy scratch last week. James White isn't necessarily that lead back role. J.J. Taylor was not even active last week. Ramondre Stevenson also had the fumble. So the only thing that's keeping my hopes alive is that Stevenson fumble as well. But yeah. I do worry about that a little bit.
I mean,
but again, it's risk.
I'm not too worried. I think Harris is the number 1. A lot of people were high on him coming into the season. I think he's the number 1 back on this team.
Okay. There you go.
Let's go over to receivers. I think we covered running backs pretty good. And we'll just start at the top of this range that as we have been doing for quarterbacks and running backs. And you see a lot of like duos up here, Metcalf and Lockett, Jefferson and Thielen. Who in this kind of high price range, there's a lot of high projected scoring games. Who are you looking at?
Yeah, and I think the duos that you're talking about there, I think that's a good point or a good place to start, because I think we like both of those games, right? We like the Seattle going into this game where they're at home against Tennessee. That's a strong place to play. And then also Minnesota going against Arizona. This is not necessarily a great matchup. We see that they're 8th right now, but that's really just because Tennessee kind of wet the bed last week. And so it is definitely an interesting thing where you have these duos, you have these different kind of wide receiver questions that are really going to end up, unfortunately, making or breaking your lineup. I mean, if you guessed correctly last week between Lockett and Thielen, That's a difference between 13 points between Lockett and Metcalf, and then you have about a 18-point difference between Thielen and Jefferson. And so just to kind of throw this up to a coin flip isn't necessarily fair, just because of how much weight is in that coin flip. But again, this is kind of a spot where it's going to be tough to know before the game which way I like to go better. Lockett is definitely a guy who's going to be coming in as lower owned. People lean more towards Metcalf just because I think there's going to be more volume, there's more consistency there. But I mean, Lockett, if you're going to be able to get him in that 1 to 5% owned range, and he has a similar game where we're going to see a lot of deep bombs, we're going to see a lot of open routes. I think just based off of what we saw in the Tennessee defense, I mean, who are the cornerbacks there that you're writing home about? I don't think there's anybody.
No.
And so I think, man, like I want to go Lockett again. I know it's kind of a tough ask just to expect the same guy to be good compared to his counterpart, who is arguably DK Metcalf is arguably a better wide receiver. Just like he's a specimen. He's unbelievable. So I think I want to go Lockett there. And then between Justin Jefferson and Thielen, again, you have this weird dichotomy where you have the guy who did better last week is now lower owned, because I think a lot of people are saying, oh, well, last week was Thielen's week, this week's Justin Jefferson's week. Same thing with Lockett. Last week was Lockett's week, this week is Metcalf's week. If you want to just stick with what's working, it might burn you, but then it might pay off. And if you get a guy who is doing 18 to 15 points better than his counterpart, and he's less owned, and he's less expensive, that seems like a lot of wins for me. I don't know necessarily the matchups too as well. I know Patrick Peterson, again, not on the Arizona sideline, so we don't have to worry about him. But again, I just think Thielen, the tough thing about him being so touchdown dependent, but at some point, is he just really good at getting touchdowns? Is that just kind of the connection that Kirk Cousins has? Right. Like, at what point do you just say, you know what? That's not fluky. That's just who Thielen is.
That's a fair point. The thing that scares me about Lockett is he only had 4 catches. I mean, he turned those 4 catches into 29 points, but if he doesn't get into the end zone twice, he's not having that great of a game. I mean, he did put up 100 yards, but you see that 69-yard score. It's just, I don't know. I don't like relying on those long touchdowns. I don't like relying it when you're paying $7,200 for a guy. If there's a guy who can maybe get you a long touchdown for $4,000, then yeah, I like that play. But I kind of lean more in Metcalf, and then it honestly is a coin flip with the Minnesota guys. So I don't know.
Yeah.
A guy I really do like though, because I talked about Matt Ryan, I'll bring him up. Calvin Ridley, Jamel Dean, who should be matched up against Calvin Ridley as the CB1, allowed 38.9 fantasy points when he was targeted against the Cowboys last week, which is just crazy.
Not good.
Not good. No, yeah, that's one way to put it. And Matt Ryan's been known, we've seen it the past couple of years. He can throw the ball 50 times a game, and he's getting up there in age, but he's still able to do it. And even if he's only hitting on 55% of those 50 balls, he's still putting up 300 yards, can throw a couple touchdowns, and he's played well against Tampa Bay in his career. He had I want to say it was opening week last week, maybe week 1 when they played the Bucs, and I think he had a 300-yard 3-touchdown game. I don't know when it was exactly, but he's had big games against Tampa Bay in his career, so I think he bounces back here. And I think Calvin Ridley is the main recipient. Russell Gage, I think, just bring him up real quick, is also going to be another cheaper play, lower owned than Ridley obviously will be, and he's only at 4,800. He's going to carry low ownership with only being targeted twice last week, but I just think there's a lot to like. If you believe Matt Ryan and the Falcons have a bounce back game, there's a lot to like about Gage.
Yeah, that's what's tough. I mean, last week when you're looking at it and you see 0 points, obviously that's not going to create any warm fuzzies in anybody's pockets when they're pulling out the checkbook on entering some of their lineups this week. But coming in at 1.5% owned, I think you definitely can get some kind of leverage there. Again, personally, I think you're more on this game than I am. I'm kind of staying away from this game just because I think Atlanta's just bad.
And you talked about the factor earlier. It could be a rainy game. We'll have to check on the weather Sunday morning to see what it looks like. But yeah, if it is a bad weather game, I might fade it.
Yeah. Well, gotcha. Well, yeah, definitely interesting plays there. I know another play that we're going to need to be talking about a lot, I think all season, not just today, are these Arizona wide receivers. Last week, you had Christian Kirk kind of being, obviously, I mean, you had DeAndre Hopkins, that's not anything, but you did have Christian Kirk coming in a lot less expensive, only 2.3 points behind him. Is that something you expect kind of to follow suit and to happen again this week, or is it something where you like either AJ Green or Rondale Moore actually than Kirk?
Yeah, I don't like Kirk as much this week. I think he'll be fine later down in the season, but I think this price increase he saw from a big game is going to hurt him this week, hurt his value this week. I don't think he's going to be consistently getting 24 points. He's probably more of a 10 to 12 point guy. So I don't know, maybe kind of where he was last week, I think is fair, like the high 4,000 range. Then you've got Nuke up there at the highest price receiver. And hey, do you know who's covering him?
You do.
Patrick Peterson, that's right.
Patrick Peterson, ex-Arizona Cardinal.
Scary game for him. Obviously, he's an insanely talented receiver. Probably one of the top 3 receivers in the league. So he will be able to put up points. I'm not too worried about that. But a play that I, for some reason, like this week, and I don't really like that I like it, AJ Green, maybe, at 3,700. He played 80% of his snaps last week. I mean, second
That's
most behind Hopkins. He had 6 targets. He only caught 2 of them.
You love that.
Like, it's crazy. He has the easiest matchup on the slate, cornerback matchup that is, for 3,700, the 4th highest priced Arizona Cardinal receiver, in a game that, any game the Cardinals are going to play this season, Kyler Murray is going to be chucking the ball. I kind of like AJ Green, and I don't know how I feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you how Fantasy Pros feels about it. He has a nice 0% roster ownership.
That makes me love him even more.
Projected. So, yeah, I mean, he's projected at 7.7 points according to them. But, man, sure, yeah, GPP play. If you want to throw AJ Green in your lineup, there you go.
We talked about it week one. That AJ Green, one week this season is going to have a big 100-yard 2-touchdown game, and he won't do anything the rest of the season.
And you think it's against Minnesota, huh?
I'm gonna keep thinking it's against whatever team the Cardinals are playing until it happens.
There you go. Well, when you hit your big milli maker, just on the backs of AJ Green, and I don't know who else are you loving this week that I hate.
I can go down to the next guy I have written down, which is Laviska Shenault. Do you like him?
Oh, yep. Sure. Yeah, on the back of Laviska Shenault and AJ Green, I will be rolling over my tomb.
Yeah, I mean,
Shenault.
I do like Laviska Shenault. He was targeted 10 times last game, and, Jacksonville only scored 13 points, right? It's just 10 times for a team that only scored 13 points. Just a lot to like about that. He came down in price. I mean, only $100, but at 4,900. And
Jacksonville scored 21.
21.
One more touchdown.
So I don't know. And Denver gave up 113 yards and a touchdown to Sterling Shepard, who plays in the slot, the same position that Chenault's playing in for Trevor Lawrence. So I think I really like Shenault again. I liked him last week. Had an okay game, 13 points, but I like him even more this week. And I don't like that I like these wide receivers for the Jags and the Bengals for my money. Not the Bengals, the Cardinals. Wow, AJ Green's on the Bengals. Patrick Peterson on the Cardinals, AJ Green on the Bengals. I don't know what year I'm living in.
Yeah, I was going to say, you need to get out of 2012. But, yeah. Laviska Shenault, I mean, again, I don't love the play. He's at 10 to 20% projected ownership. So it's not necessarily even a great kind of pivot. But hey, if you love it, you love it. I think my biggest counterpoint to that, one, I do think this Broncos defense is actually pretty good. Two, I think Sterling Shepard's really good. I could be off on that. I could be admittedly off. But watching that game,
2 good games.
Yeah, he gets a lot of usage.
Yeah, he does.
Like, Daniel Jones loves him, and I think he's pretty good. I mean, he was kind of always that player that always you kind of hoped would do good. You draft him in like the last round of your fantasy draft. You're like, oh, maybe I got something here with Sterling Shepard. He looks pretty good, and so, I mean, he's definitely going to be the gadget guy that Chenault is for this offense. And coming from Urban Meyer, who had Curtis Samuel and kind of used him a lot as that same prototypical spot at Ohio State. I mean, yeah, if you can get that usage, then sure, why not?
Yeah.
But speaking of that, I like the Broncos, so we're going to talk about, I don't know if we necessarily touched on him enough in the quarterbacks, if at all, but Teddy Bridgewater, he's coming in pretty high owned. I think a lot of people saw what Tyrod Taylor did against this defense of the Jacksonville Jaguars last week, and they're going to be moving over to Teddy Bridgewater. We did get the unfortunate news that we are going to get no Jerry Jeudy for, I think, 8 weeks is the number there. And so with that, we have Cameron Sutton. Cameron Sutton's a cornerback for the Steelers. Courtland Sutton, though, is who we're going to be talking about now. And he, rough game last week, right? He had 2.4 points. Tim Patrick, somebody who actually only got 4 targets, but somebody who Teddy Bridgewater is looking more often to. And then a sneaky guy that I actually really like is KJ Hamler, who is a great wide receiver out of Penn State. Also got 4 targets. Do you have any way that you lean on any of those 3 guys?
I like Tim Patrick. I don't know too much about Hamler, so I won't comment on him. But between Patrick and Sutton, I'm leaning Patrick for the discount. I think what's the ownership look like between those two? Do you know?
Tim Patrick is at 1 to 5%, and then let me pull up Sutton. Same. So they're both in the 1 to 5% category. So
okay, so about the same ownership. I still think Patrick will be lower just because Courtland Sutton's the bigger name. But Patrick, even though he had 4 targets, 2 of those were in the red zone. Obviously, he caught the touchdown. He's going up against Shaquille Griffin this week, and he's got a 4-inch height advantage on him. So I really like that about him. Sutton also has a pretty good matchup. There you go. Sutton's going up against C.J. Henderson, who had a rough season last week, sophomore out of the University of Florida, missed half the season due to injury. So I think he can also take advantage of a younger cornerback. But I just, the $600 price discount and those red zone targets make me lean a little bit more Tim Patrick's way.
Yeah. I think those are both fair points. I do like KJ Hamler in this, kind of as somebody who has been showing up more as of late. I know a lot of people are kind of coming his way later in the week just because of some of the articles that have been coming out from different sources. But the reason why is just because I think he's going to be the guy playing the slot, and Teddy Bridgewater has historically shown that he likes guys playing in the slot, and to get 4 passes thrown his way, 3 of them for 41 yards. I mean, Hamler's no joke. He is only 5'9". He's not this big, grueling wide receiver, but he is somebody who is quick. He's somebody who can do a lot with it after he catches the ball. And so if he can get some production, and then also if you watch the game at all, he had a 56-yard touchdown that was just missed. Like, the throw was just missed. If he had that, I think we're talking a lot more about Hamler this week if he gets that extra, 6.6 points just for the catch and the yards, and then you also throw a touchdown because it was in the end zone. I mean, you get an extra 12 points out of Hamler. His price is shooting up, and now you're getting him at $3,800. I think that's definitely a strong option. Again, coming in at low ownership, even though I think some of the top end people are starting to kind of recognize, okay, maybe there's something here. Yeah,
probably also talking a lot more about Ted Bridgewater if that pass is completed.
Oh man, dude, love me some Teddy Bridgewater, but unfortunately, I think a lot of people are. I don't think they are. I know that Bridgewater is coming in. I think at the sixth highest projected ownership this week, and so yeah, I think he's gonna be another good play. But he's kind of a chalk here. He's more of the Jameis Winston last week kind of a play,
Right.
which is not a bad play. Which is not a bad play at all to have Jameis Winston-esque out of what we had last week with the 5 touchdowns. I'd be great with that.
Not at all. All right, let's move over to tight ends. Kind of wrap up these last 2 position groups, or 1.5 position groups, or 12 position groups, however you want to put it. Who do you like for tight end this week?
Tight end is such a weird spot because, first off, I think Waller is just unbelievable. Like, he's getting usage, he's getting production, got the touchdown even. You see 30 points, almost 29.5. I think he's really good, but I do think the Steelers defense is good. And I think they're really good at the linebacker position as well, and the safety position with you, Terrell Edmonds. You got Minka. I don't think Minka necessarily will be guarding him one-on-one, but you got Devin Bush, you got Joe Schobert in there. I think Waller's still going to eat, but I don't think he's necessarily going to be somebody who's having a monster game. Somebody who I do like more so, though, again, we're talking about him a lot. Noah Fant is somebody who I do like, just because that big gap that's going to be created now that Jerry Jeudy's gone. He is coming at 10 to 20% ownership, so it's not necessarily something that we love on the ownership side, but I think it's going to be a solid play.
Yeah, we also don't like, just because he has high ownership doesn't mean we should just fade a guy.
True.
Like, you're not going to get every single guy in the slate at less than 5% ownership.
You're probably doing something wrong.
You're doing something wrong, right? You don't have a good lineup. Like, there's somewhere where we need to eat the chalk. I think Noah Fant's kind of one of those positions. He's one of 4 tight ends that I'm kind of keeping in my player pool this week. Also, the Jags allowed the second most touchdowns to tight ends last season. And like you said, without Jeudy there, Fant's going to be probably the number 1 target on that team, at least based on what we saw from Courtland Sutton last week. So I like Fant a lot at 4,200. Then my other 3 tight ends, two of them on the same team, Hunter Henry and JONNU Smith at 4,500 and 4,300 for the Pats. Mac Jones threw 39 passes, and 8 of them went to their tight ends, 5 to Smith, 3 to Henry. All 8 of them were completed. I think these are both great plays, especially against the Jets, who I think were either the worst or the second worst team last year against tight ends. They weren't good. The Jets are never good. I hope they continue to not be good because it amuses me. But I think both of those guys are good plays. I'll probably lean JONNU Smith just because those 2 extra targets. I guess if you're paying $100 a target over Hunter Henry, that's good value. But I think both those are good plays. And then one guy that I think we both kind of agree on, Tyler Higbee, played 100% of the offensive snaps last week. 100%. That helps. Yeah. And, the Rams, we mentioned it with Stafford. I mentioned it with Stafford, but that's a bad front 7 that the Colts have. So, Stafford's going to be going to the air a lot. Obviously, front 7 means linebackers who most likely are covering the tight end. So it's not going to be an easy matchup for Higbee. But I think if Stafford's throwing the ball 40 times, he got 6 targets last week. If we see that same 6, maybe even 7 or 8, I think this is just a great play.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think going back to the JONNU Smith and the Hunter Henry there, obviously we see JONNU Smith with a questionable tag being limited in practice today on Friday.
He also plays for New England, where every guy is limited in practice and questionable until Bill Belichick decides who he's playing an hour before the game.
That's true, but if it, for whatever reason, if he does sit, love Hunter Henry this week, even more so. But yeah, definitely Higbee though too, with Gerald Everett not being around. I do like Everett as well. I think he was somebody who last week I kind of hinted at, but then was like, he's going up against Darius Leonard and the strong Colts defense there. And you got a touchdown. You got 2 catches for 20 yards and a touchdown. So I think Gerald Everett's another guy, but also him not being on the Rams anymore is huge for Higbee.
Right.
Definitely.
Any other tight ends you like?
I think really that's about it. It's just kind of a weird spot where maybe you play some Jared Cook, maybe you play some Njoku. I don't know. Just games where you think there's going to be a lot of passing volume. Maybe it's something where you stack them up with your quarterback. But really, I don't think you go with Waller. I think I like Kittle just because I think he had an okay game, and I think he's due for having a big one. But yeah, I don't necessarily like anybody too much outside of those 4 that you mentioned as well.
All right, then let's move on. Close it out with defense. Not really much to talk about here, but Patriots at 3,700 are enticing versus the Jets. Another team I like is the Bears against Cincinnati. I don't know, because I do like Joe Burrow because I think that they're throwing the ball a lot against Chicago, but I think that's also a decent play if you want to go cheap. Broncos against Jacksonville, they're at 3,800. They're a little bit more expensive, but if you have that salary, sure, go for it. I don't know. Yeah. Defense is always just a plug and play for me.
Yeah, for me, I think you hit a couple. I think anything where I can fit the Patriots in, I think I'm going to try to. And then also, the Bears defense is definitely in a spot where I don't think it's as good as it used to be. I think that secondary is pretty beat up. It's pretty rough. But the Steelers is a spot that I like. I think that defense looked really strong against what should be an offensive juggernaut in the Bills. Obviously, having the blocked punt for a safety helps. But you hear news today that there's no Josh Jacobs for Las Vegas this week. The reason why we didn't really touch on that in the running back section is because even with Peyton Barber being listed as the workhorse, they still have Kenyon Drake there, so it looks like a running back by committee against a defense that is very stout against the run. If you want to throw Peyton Barber in some lineups, go for it, but I think we're really working on a spot where the Steelers are going to be going up against. I think I saw a statistic today that the starting offensive line, nobody has more than 40 starts on it. Most of them have under 10 or 15 on the offensive starting line. And so I think it's going to be a long day for Derek Carr, especially coming off of an emotional Monday night win against the Ravens, and then having to come all the way over to the East side for a 1:00 game. I think it's going to be a tough run.
Short week, cross coast. Yeah. Hey, why don't you hit that little green plus next to the Steelers, and let's build our week 2 hands down DFS lineup, and we'll start off with the best play on the slate, the Steelers defense.
Come on, let's go. And who we put in that quarterback?
Who do we both really like? Let's scroll up to the top here. I think Kyler Murray is a little bit too much of an obvious play. I think Herbert we talked about being chalk, but I think both Prescott and Herbert are going to be throwing the ball a lot, so I'm good with either of those two. Teddy Bridgewater is another guy we both mentioned a lot. Again, 6th highest owned guy, but I think he still has a very high ceiling for this game, and he's very cheap.
Yeah, I would say either Bridgewater or Matthew Stafford. I think are probably my two top spots. You have Tyrod Taylor as well, but I don't know if you want to put him in the hands down lineup.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's go with Bridgewater. Kind of stick with a little bit of a more chalky play. And let's find a stack for him right off the bat.
Okay.
Tim Patrick, Courtland Sutton, KJ Hamler. Who are we leaning at?
I think we both like Patrick. I think we both had a common denominator there of liking Patrick. I think you like Sutton a little bit more than I do. I think I lean more towards Hamler.
Or did we go Fant?
Oh, we could go Fant.
I think Fant's is going to be a solid play. I think we'll get a lot of volume, and I like the double, putting 2 pass catchers with the quarterback. I think it worked out.
There you go.
It's worked out in the past. Worked out for the Millie Maker winners in the past. So let's go for it.
There you go. And then who do you want to go for the running backs?
I I know he's a homer pick for you, so you probably like him a lot. But I agree. I really like Najee Harris this week. I think he gets a lot of work, a lot more than he did last week, and I think he should be able to be more productive with those carries. So I think he's a good play.
Okay. Let's do that, and then I'll take your guy since you went with my guy. No, I'm not taking Gaskins, but I'll take Damien Harris because I was going to like him this week.
I was going to say I lean Harris. If you're worried about the fumble, I understand, but I think Harris is going to be a good play this week.
I'm worried about it, but I'm trusting you.
Leaves us a lot of room to pay up for receivers. So
paying up for receivers. So we're going AJ Green, right?
Don't talk me into it. No, for one, I mean, maybe in, like you said, 2012, he was probably up here. But for now, since we're living in the current days, I guess let's pick one of the Minnesota or Seattle guys. Which of those teams, and then we'll decide on the player.
I think I like Seattle more for the wide receivers. Just because I think Arizona has a stronger defense. I trust Wilson more than I trust Kirk Cousins, and so
that's very fair.
I would lean towards Seattle, and I think the ownership is pretty much the same anyway. So I would lean Seattle if the ownership is going to be about the same.
And then we have the age-old question of Lockett or Metcalf. You like Lockett a little bit more. Those 2 touchdowns on 4 catches scare me, and even though he might be a little bit more chalky, I do like the narrative of them kind of flip-flopping games. So I like Metcalf a little bit more than Lockett, but I think either are going to be a fine play.
We'll go Metcalf because you're a big narrative guy.
Always play on the narrative. Is there any other revenge game on the slate? And I'll pick that player.
Tyrod Taylor, man. I'm telling you, Tyrod Taylor against... Just wait until it's Tyrod Taylor versus the guy who stabbed him in the lung. That's going to be the ultimate revenge game.
That's a revenge game you want to put on Showtime pay-per-view. So mid-range wide receiver, probably in this low 6,000, upper 5,000 range, and we could fill out a flex spot. Who do we like here? I think CeeDee Lamb's going to get a lot of work. I think Dallas throws the ball a lot. I think they just run a lot of plays in general. We did talk about Cooper Kupp with Stafford. Do you like him?
I mean, Bill Simmons said he was the second best fantasy wide receiver in the league. So
we're getting the second best fantasy wide receiver at 6,000. I think that's fine.
I mean, that sounds like a steal to me, but
yeah.
I think he might. Yeah, we're just gonna go for it. Why not?
Let's do it.
Okay, and then who do we finish out with if we go at 7,500? Oh, look at that. It's like we scripted this. Like we know what we're doing.
Put in.
There you go.
You're talking about AJ Green, right? Oh, Ridley.
Oh,
okay.
Sorry. Yeah. No.
Well, Ridley or Jefferson, we could hit both of those wide receiver duos that we liked. I do like Ridley, but I know you.
I know you liked Ridley. I saw him there at 7,500. The ownership is about the same. Let me pull up just to confirm. Yeah, it's same ownership, same projected pretty much according to Fantasy Pros. So,
well, then there you have it.
It's all on feel. Who you going with, Ridley?
Let's stick with Ridley. I'm looking for a big game for Matt Ryan. So
well, there you go.
There's our week 2
Feel good about this lineup. A lot better than last week's, I feel like.
Yeah, I think we tried to do a bit too much with last week. Should have just kind of, I don't know why we tried to get fancy and not play DeAndre Hopkins, but you live and you learn. So here's our week 2 official hands down lineup. We'll be posting this on Twitter, and you can follow along with how it does in the contest we enter. But that'll do it for us for the week 2 DraftKings main slate breakdown. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit subscribe, hit the like, leave a comment, follow us on Twitter, just interact with us, and we'll interact back with you guys. And if you have any feedback, let us know. We'd love to make changes. But thanks so much for watching. Scotty, closing remarks.
Closing remarks, looking at the team, feel good about it. Love the double Harris. I didn't even realize that. We have double Harris running backs. But yeah, excited about this. We're learning, guys. Excited about getting a better product to you guys each and every week. And so, yeah, just let us know. And we're just happy to be doing this, having fun. It's good stuff.
That's right. All right, guys. Catch you in week 3.